This content is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before ordering, interpreting, or acting on any lab work. Welcome back. Today we are going to walk through exactly what blood work to pull before starting a peptide or a performance protocol and what to check after you have been running it. The goal here is not just to run labs, but to understand what your body is doing, what levers you are pulling, and how to make intelligent adjustments instead of guessing. Let's start with the mindset first, because this matters more than the specific labs. Baseline data is everything. If you do not know where you started, then your results are just feelings. You might feel better, worse, or different, but you will not actually know what changed under the surface. Blood work turns this into a controlled experiment. Pre-protocol blood work is your baseline. This is your starting snapshot. You want to capture your hormones, your metabolic health, your inflammation levels, your organ function, and your nutrient status. Post-protocol blood work is your comparison. That is where you evaluate what moved, what improved, what got worse, and what needs to be adjusted. So, let's build this out step by step in a way you can actually follow. First, your foundational panel. This is what everyone should run regardless of what they are taking. This includes a complete blood count, often called a CBC, and a comprehensive metabolic panel, often called a CMP. The CBC tells you about your red blood cells, white blood cells, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and platelets. This gives insight into oxygen carrying capacity, immune activity, and whether there are any signs of anemia or infection. If you are running anything that can impact recovery, inflammation, or even hydration status, this becomes important. The CMP gives you a look at your liver enzymes, kidney function, electrolytes, and glucose. This is critical because a lot of people jump into peptides or other compounds without realizing that their liver enzymes are already elevated or their kidney function is not optimal. You want to know this before you add anything. Next, fasting glucose and insulin. Do not skip this. Fasting glucose alone is not enough. You need fasting insulin to understand how hard your body is working to keep that glucose in range. From these two numbers, you can calculate something called HOMA-IR, which gives you a rough estimate of insulin resistance. This is especially important if you are using anything in the GLP-1 category or anything that impacts metabolism, fat loss, or appetite. You want to see if your insulin sensitivity improves over time, not just whether your weight changes. Now, let's move into lipids. You want a full lipid panel. This includes total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. If you can go deeper and get ApoB and lipoprotein a, these give you a more accurate picture of cardiovascular risk. A lot of people focus only on weight loss, but ignore what is happening to their lipids. Some interventions can improve them, some can worsen them, and you need to know which direction you are moving. Next is inflammation. You want to pull high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, also called hsCRP. This is a marker of systemic inflammation. Lower is generally better. If you are running peptides for recovery, healing, or longevity, this is one of the key markers you want to see improve. Now we move into hormones, and this is where things get more specific depending on your goals, but there are still core labs everyone should consider. For men, you want total testosterone, free testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, and estradiol using a sensitive assay. This gives you a full picture of androgen status and how much of that testosterone is actually available. For women, you want estradiol, progesterone, total testosterone, free testosterone, and sex hormone binding globulin. Timing matters here. If you are cycling, these labs should be drawn at a consistent point in your cycle, usually in the early follicular phase, unless you are tracking something specific. For both men and women, you want thyroid function. This includes TSH, free T3, free T4, and ideally reverse T3. Thyroid function drives metabolism, energy, and temperature regulation. If your thyroid is off, it will impact everything else you are trying to do. Next is IGF-1. This is a big one if you're using growth hormone secretagogues like CJC, 1295, ipamorelin, or anything similar. IGF-1 is a downstream marker of growth hormone activity. It gives you an indirect way to see whether your protocol is actually doing what you think it is doing. If you are running something like MOS-C or NAD plus focus protocols, you still want IGF-1 because it helps you understand the broader anabolic and recovery environment of your body. Now, let's talk about cortisol. You want at least a morning cortisol. If you can, a 4-point saliva cortisol test is even better because it shows you your rhythm throughout the day. But at minimum, get a morning cortisol. This matters because stress, sleep disruption, and certain compounds can shift your cortisol patterns. If your cortisol is too high or too low, it will affect fat loss, energy, and even mood. Next, let's look at micronutrients. This is where a lot of people are deficient and do not realize it. At minimum, you want vitamin D, B12, and folate. Vitamin D in particular is one of the most common deficiencies and plays a role in immune function, hormone regulation, and overall health. If you want to go deeper, you can add magnesium, zinc, and iron studies, including ferritin. Ferritin is important because it reflects your iron stores, not just what is circulating in your blood. Now, let's talk about pre versus post timing. Your baseline labs should be done after at least a week or 2 of stable habits. That means consistent sleep, consistent diet, and no major changes right before the test. You want a clean baseline, not one influenced by a random bad week. Once you start your protocol, you typically want to recheck labs in about 8 to 12 weeks. This gives your body enough time to show meaningful changes without waiting too long. For some markers like glucose and insulin, you may see changes sooner. For others, like lipids or hormone shifts, it can take a bit longer. 8 to 12 weeks is a solid middle ground. Now, let's walk through what you are actually looking for in your post-labs. First, are your safety markers stable? This means your liver enzymes, kidney function, and blood counts. If anything here is trending in the wrong direction, that is a signal to reassess. Second, are your target markers moving in the direction you want? If you are focused on fat loss and metabolic health, you want to see improvements in fasting insulin, HOMA-IR, and triglycerides. If you are focused on recovery and performance, you may look at IGF-1 inflammation markers and possibly testosterone or other hormones. Third, are there unintended consequences? This is huge. Sometimes you improve one area and worsen another. For example, you might lower your weight but increase your LDL or suppress your natural hormone production. Bloodwork helps you catch this early. Now, let's talk about consistency. When you run your post-labs, try to replicate the conditions of your baseline as closely as possible. Same time of day, same fasting state, similar sleep the night before. This reduces variability and makes your comparison more accurate. Also, do not chase single data points. Look at trends. One slightly off value does not necessarily mean something is wrong. Look at the overall pattern and how multiple markers are moving together. Another important piece is context. Numbers do not exist in isolation. For example, a higher hematocrit might be fine if everything else is stable and you are well hydrated, but it might be a concern if it is paired with other changes. Always interpret labs as a system, not as individual numbers. Let's also talk about overtesting. More is not always better. It is tempting to order every lab under the sun, but if you do not understand what you are looking at, it does not help you. Start with a solid core panel, then add more specific tests based on your goals and what you find. Finally, remember that blood work is a tool, not the goal. The goal is to feel better, perform better, and improve your health. Labs help guide you, but they should be combined with how you feel, how you are sleeping, how you are recovering, and how you are functioning day to day. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before ordering, interpreting, or acting on any lab work. Thanks for listening, keep learning, and stay curious.